Good afternoon, Professor and class. This is Giovanni. In today's presentation, we're going to go over Chapter 10 of our textbook, Appraisals. For this, I'm going to be going over a few topics. First, the pros and the cons for trade praise appraisals, behavioral-based systems, and results-based. Next, the three most difficult rating errors: cognitive limitations, intentional manipulation, and organizational influences. Third, two recommendations for improving performance appraisals. Next, I'm going to discuss progressive discipline and positive corrective action. And lastly, I'm going to give my personal opinion about the elimination of the appraisal system, if it should be eliminated, and my reasons why. Grade-based appraisals are a performance evaluation method that focuses on an employee's personal characteristics that the organization deems important for the job. For example, if the employee is punctual, follows instructions, responds to management directions, and performs well under pressure, etc. Some of the pros of this evaluation is that an organization may use this across different departments. Also, if it is constructed well, it can address many major areas of work in a generic way. It is simple to use, meaning it can be completed quickly. However, the cons are many. It is not customizable. Other categories, regardless of how beneficial or desirable they may be, are rarely added. Even the ease of use may cause managers complications. Because of its ease, managers might rush it, which may lead to complications when judgment or assessments are made without care and documentation. Also, it does not capture the essence of non-routine and managerial work. Lastly, it is reactive and pulse-oriented. Unlike the trait-based appraisals that looks at an employee's characteristics, the behavioral-based system appraisal focuses on evaluating what employees actually do on the job. In other words, it is a system that evaluates employees' performance by focusing on specific observable behaviors. The pros for this type of evaluation that they are customizable for a specific job or job group. Since it is tailored to specific jobs or job groups, the categories used with the evaluation fit the work environment. Vagueness may be reduced. Lastly, they are best suited for professional jobs because of the nuances, language, and categories that professionals tend to use. However, they come with their own cons. They are not practical because each job requires its own evaluation. They are time consuming, and an agency might not have the personnel or instruments to design it, yet get it approved in the hierarchy. Lastly, there is little evidence to support any superiority for this evaluation that causes an organization to spend much resources, including time and money. Next is results-based systems. In a result-based system, an employee is not evaluated on either personal characteristics or behaviors, but instead is evaluated on whether they meet or exceed specific measurable goals that an organization and the employee agreed upon. It has an outcome-oriented approach. The pros are plentiful. First, goals are clearly established. Next, plans are provided on how to reach those goals, making this evaluation future-oriented. Third, this forces managers and employees to work together. And lastly, many managers, executives, and employees that have used the system on project base like it. But like the previous two appraisal, it has its own cons. It is time consuming. Sometimes individuals have conflicting ideas and views or objectives, which might cause strife. The technique can stifle also creativity, and teamwork may suffer if a person is more interested in personal objectives. I now move on to the three most difficult rating errors and how these errors might affect an employee's professional growth and development. Starting with the cognitive limitations. It is a subcategory, the spillover effects. According to the cognitive information processing theory, appraisals are a complex memory-based process that involves data acquisition, storage, retrieval, and analysis. When all of this data is processed, subjective categories are employed by the rater that might produce rating errors. One of those being the spillover effect. The spillover effect, also called the halo effect or black mark effect, happens when a person's overall evaluation is influenced by one good halo or one bad black mark action. This leads to a biased and unfair assessment. Now, this might affect an employee in all the negative ways. One, let's say that an employee is truly working hard and they truly care for the organization, but because of one effect, one error, they are deemed inadequate or not meeting expectations during the assessment evaluation. So, despite all their effort, despite all their progress in whatever the objective and goals are, they are still looked down upon because of that one error. This might cause an employee to lose motivation and not want to progress and do the bare minimum in order to keep their job. And the opposite is true. Let's say you have an employee that truly is not meeting expectation, but because they did one great thing, they exceeded in one aspect of their job, they are giving high praise. This right here ignores all the faults that the individual has. And how would they grow as a professional? How would they learn about what they are doing right and wrong if all you're focused on is the one good thing, the halo that they did? This right here is not beneficial to the employee. Counter is actually harmful. The next concept of error ratings is intentional manipulation and its subcategory leniency error. In many organizations, appraisals are viewed as political rather than objective. Ratings are often intentionally adjusted, either to inflate or deflate an employee. However, the employee does not deserve it, and the evaluation does not reflect the employee's true performance. Now, there are different reasons why this happens, one of which is leniency error. The leniency error is when all employees are given a favorable performance evaluation, that is also known as the Santa Claus effect, but without the lump of coal. Now, this can be caused by many reasons, including a manager trying to keep a good working relationship, encourage a managerial employee, a marginal employee, or show empathy for someone who is going through a tough time. Regardless, this evaluation is not true. Now, much like the previous error, this strife stifles an employee's growth. How can an employee grow in their position, grow in their profession, grow in their craft if they're not being given a true assessment, a true evaluation? If everybody's being given the same rating all across the board, what incentive does an individual have to do better? In the public sector, as mentioned many times, it's not always about the money. It's not always about the power or prestige. It's about making good. It's about cultivating your craft. But how can that happen if your evaluator, your manager, is giving everybody the same score across the board? It's not helpful, regardless of the situation. Even if you are going through a hard time, it is better to be truthful so that that way you could take that constructive criticism and apply it to your craft to better yourself, either for your current position or for your future positions. Lastly, I get to the organizational influences and a subcategory, the no money effect. Many times, an organization, its policies or contracts might influence an appraisal. Many times, appraisals are a formality, a yearly thing to do for managers based on the policies of the organization. Many managers and employees see it as organizational wallpaper, especially if you take into account the no money effect. This is when employees, after an appraisal, the organization either has insufficient funds for a raise or raises are awarded across the board. In other words, an employee is not being evaluated by merit. Now, I have seen this in Orange County when employees reach the highest step in their position and they are guaranteed a yearly increase due to their union contracts or MOUs, making the evaluation a formality and not really a useful tool. Now, as mentioned earlier, this really hurts employees because it doesn't allow them to grow. It doesn't allow them to learn and cultivate their craft. If they're going to be guaranteed money and if they reach the highest step in their position, many employees don't find a reason why to exceed or why to grow, especially if they feel like the position they're in is going to be the position they're going to retire in. So when you use something like this, when you have organizational influences affecting the appraisals, both the manager and the employee don't really see the importance of it, especially when you put the financial piece of it. I now move on to the recommendations. Now, for this, it takes two to tango. Now, our textbook mentions the following. First, managers need to be convinced that the system is relevant and operational, the system being the appraisal system. And second, employees should see it as in their best interest. In order to do this, both the manager and employee should work together to improve the evaluation process. Now, in my personal life, I have used this in my current position with the County of Orange. When I first started the position, the first year, I had two different evaluations, one at the 6 month mark and one in the 1 year mark. On the 6 month mark, my manager told me these were the expectations of the county. This is where they what they wanted you to do. This is where they wanted you to be during the 6 months. And based on everything that you have done, you have either met expectations or exceeded it. Afterwards, my manager and I developed a plan together for our next evaluation, which consisted of goals, SMART goals, and objectives, and a plan on what she could do to help me and what I could do in order to reach those goals. The collaboration of both my manager and I was truly beneficial because I was able to meet the goals in my yearly evaluation when I exceeded expectations. So, with that said, I truly believe that the best way to improve the system will be a collaboration between the managers and the employees. Now, our textbook describes discipline as the orderly conduct at work achieved by self control and respect for the agency rules. And to be quite frankly, this is the perfect description. There are two possible ways to accomplish this, either through progressive discipline, or more accurately known as progressive punishment, or positive corrective action. Now, progressive discipline, I hope that many of us, well, not hope, but I'm pretty sure that most of us are aware of. This is where you are punished for not doing your job or not meeting expectations. Normally, the way it works is that you are given verbal warnings. After a verbal warning, you are given write ups. And after a certain amount of write ups, you are let go, terminated. Now, this is beneficial because it does keep an employee accountable. It does make an employee understand that if he or she doesn't meet expectations or meet the goals of the agency or the goals that were agreed upon in the contract, that they will lose their job. Many of us, we have bills to pay, so we wouldn't want to risk our livelihood. So I do believe that this technique, the stick, is beneficial, but it's not the only technique that could work. Another one is positive corrective action. Now, when it comes to positive corrective action, this is the opposite. This is not so much about punishment, but more about addressing an error or addressing a wrong. Now, both in this spread here, both the manager and the employee get together. They talk about what's going on wrong, they develop a plan. Afterwards, they have a second meeting to talk about like, hey, where are you at with these goals? Are you meeting expectations? If you're not, this is what you could do. If you are, thank you continuing. Let's see how you could grow. Now, after the second meeting, if the individual is no longer doing well, then they could have a third meeting talking about like, hey, do you want to take some time off, come back and do your job, or is it time for you to part way with us? Now, this is great because this shows a collaboration, teamwork. Instead of giving somebody punishment, you're looking at them as a responsible and professional individual and giving them the opportunity to grow and to collaborate. You know, both approaches are beneficial when it comes to the employee. You know, what might work on one might not work on the other, but these are tools that are in our box that we may be able to use in the future. Now, personally, I don't think that appraisal should be eliminated. Contrary, I believe, they're very beneficial. I take pride in my work. I take pride in my craft. I take pride in being able to be a steward of our citizens' resources. With that said, in order for me to do my job better, I need guidance. I need accountability. I need constructive criticism. Now, I don't know if I am in the minority, but I truly believe that this is a great tool, not just for an agency to keep track of individuals and help them grow, but also for an individual to grow. Also, when it comes to discipline, appraisals are needed, especially when it comes to unruly employees who for whatever reason, decide not to follow the rules or not to do the jobs. Documentation is important. Justification for termination is important, and all of these appraisals could work towards that. You are showing that you are trying to work with an individual. Unfortunately, there's some people that, for whatever reason, they just don't work out. So with that said, no, I don't believe that assessments or evaluations should ever be removed. If anything, they could be improved upon, as mentioned earlier, when it comes to the collaboration. Thank you for your time, and I wish all of you a great week. God bless.